1, 2, 3, a Zach DeWolf's video for thee.
Hey guys, it's Zach here, and it's getting to that time of year where boxes of chocolates and conversation hearts are lining the shelves. So today in this video, I'm going to show you how to make 5 different Valentine's Day cards for your significant other. No matter if your partner's a furry or Therian, or even an ESSA handler or Kandi kid. Or even if you just want to give your friend a nice Valentine's Day card to show your appreciation for their friendship. We've got the perfect card ideas for you. Let's do it. Here's what you'll need for these crafts. A pair of scissors, some paint markers, but if you don't have these, Sharpies and or acrylic paint will work fine. A hot glue gun and hot glue sticks, but craft glue will work fine too. Optionally, a ruler or tape measure for straight lines, though I don't like to do this and abandoned it very quickly. Some clear tape. I use packing tape, but Scotch tape will work just fine as long as it's see-through. Some colored construction paper, and also some plain white printer paper. I forget to show it here, but you also want some cardboard. The first one we're going to make today is the furry one. To start out, we're going to take our base paper for our card, in this case white, and we're going to fold it directly in half. Make sure to line it up with those edges, and once you've got it, we're going to crease it with our finger. Then you're going to open it back up so we can start working on the card's interior. For my card, I decided I wanted the inside to be pink. Line up your second piece of paper in the same way as your first. And just like the first paper, we're going to fold it in half, line up the edges, and crease with our fingers. If you've done it right, when you put one inside the other and fold it together, they're the same shape. Then, keeping the pink closed but the white open, we're going to apply some hot glue only onto the pink. Then, once you have the hot glue, very carefully make sure your paper still lines up with the first one. Then you're going to gently fold it over and glue them together. If you're like me and you're using hot glue instead of craft glue, only use a very tiny bit of hot glue, just enough to make them stick. If you use too much hot glue, when it dries it can become lumpy and hard to draw on. Once your first half is glued down, do the same thing on the other half. When you're done, you should have a card with a white exterior and pink interior. Now, if you want extra straight lines, here's where your ruler comes into play. I tried to do this for like the first card, but I don't like doing that because I'm lazy and I hated it. Plus, I'm not actually giving these cards to anyone, so I don't care. But if you're giving it to a partner or friend, you probably should care and use a ruler. Put in the effort to make a lovely gift to your friend or partner. Nobody wants a lazy card. Just put in all the effort and try your best. What you've been seeing me do in the background is I've been drawing on this card with a white paint marker so you can't really see it, and I drew some lines to make our card a little smaller that I'm then going to cut along. When you're cutting your card to the right size, keep this in mind. If you're a bit younger and your school does Valentine boxes where you all go around and give out your cards to your friends and classmates, you're going to want to make the card pretty small, even smaller than I make it, because it's going to need to fit into a tiny box made to be brought to school. However, if you're more in high school, you can make the card about the same size as I make it because you're carrying it in your backpack to give to a friend. But if you're shipping the letter or giving it to someone directly in person, you can make it whatever size you want because you don't have to worry about it getting damaged or bent in a backpack. Once you have your card trimmed down to the size you want it, we're going to take our ruler and a paint marker or Sharpie and start drawing on our decorations. For my card, I want the front and back to be pink and white stripes. What you see me doing here is I'm taking my ruler and I'm drawing along the edge of it to make the outlines for my stripes. Also, as you can see here, I suck apparently at using any form of ruler or tape measure to do this, and that's kind of why I stopped because it didn't seem to help that much. Once you got the outline for all your stripes, you can start coloring them in. While I did my outlines with paint markers, I decided to use a Sharpie to color it in. I do this because my paint markers are very finely tipped, and it would literally take ages for me to color them in with the size of my marker. And since paint markers have paint in them, I'd probably disintegrate my card before I even got halfway through. Once you have the front of your card colored in, it's time to do the back. You're going to do this by folding your card open so it lays flat. Then, you're going to take your marker and line it up with the same lines as your stripes on the front. That way, when you open up the card, they match and line up perfectly. Then, just like you did with the front, we're going to color them all in. And once you do that, we have the background for our card. Now we're going to make our furry boy kisser for the front. Take a sheet of white printer paper and line up your card on the corner of the printer paper. Then, once you have it lined up as close as you can get it, take your scissors and cut the printer paper around in the same shape as your card. When you're done, you should have a single piece of white printer paper that's the exact same size as your card. This is where we're going to draw our furry boy kisser. The reason we cut out the printer paper to be the same size as the card is that when we draw our boy kisser on the front, it will absolutely 100% fit inside the card. If you just draw it on a piece of blank printer paper, you risk it being too big to fit on your card, or even too small to look good. Now, when you're drawing on your boy kisser, I highly recommend you look at a reference of what boy kisser looks like to make sure you get it as close as possible. Boy kisser isn't really that hard to draw because he's just a doodle, but it would still be good to use a reference. It also wouldn't hurt to practice drawing boy kisser on some scrap paper first. That way, when you draw the final version, you can ensure it looks great. And I know I'm drawing boy kisser for this card, but if you don't like kissing boys, you can make him a girl kisser, or even a non-binary kisser, any gender you want. Or if you just don't want a boy kisser for whatever reason, you can just draw your persona. And quick fun fact, I'm actually not using a reference here at all, I'm going purely off of memory. I've just seen a boy kisser like a million billion times, so I know pretty much exactly what he looks like. Man, I'm chronically online. Now that I've drawn the line art for my boy kisser, I'm gonna take my paint marker and go over all the lines I've drawn. I feel it looks a lot better when the lines are very bold. When you do that, it makes your eyes want to focus on him more, making the drawing pop and be super cool looking. Now that we have our boy kisser drawing, we can go ahead and cut him out. When you're cutting out your boy kisser, I recommend leaving some white left over as an outline. If you do want to cut all the way down to the line art, that's fine, but you gotta be extra careful not to cut into any of your lines. When you're cutting straight to the line art, it's super duper easy to break the line art or even just cut way too close, making your lines all weird and wobbly. I very highly recommend to just leave a white outline too, because it also just looks a little better in general, but it's your card, so it's ultimately up to you. Once your boy kisser is all cut out, place him on the card and sort of figure out where you want him to be placed. For this card, we want to place him pretty much as close to the center as we can, because we're going to be writing some words on the top and bottom, so we need to leave room for them. Once you figure out where you want to place your boy kisser, cover the entire back of him in hot glue. Then we're going to very carefully stick him on our card. Now, using a paint marker, we're going to write on our text. For this card, I'm going to add on boy kisser's iconic catchphrase. You like kissing boys, don't you? And like I said earlier, if you don't want to add that or you want to add something else, feel free. This is your card. You should make it personalized to whatever makes you or your partner happy. I will say though, if you're really young, don't add this onto your card, especially if you're going to be giving it away to school. Not because kissing boys is wrong, but just because teachers will get upset if you say that, and if you're really young, you probably shouldn't be kissing anyway. So maybe if you're a bit younger, just stick to the silly cat drawing. I don't want to be responsible if you get detention or if you get a parent called because you wrote kissing boys on your Valentine's Day card. And if you decide to ignore this advice and do it anyway, do not come running to me or point in my direction saying I told you to do it if you get in trouble. Do not use me as an excuse if you have to have an uncomfortable talk with your parents and your teacher. I am not responsible for your actions. Once you've finished writing on your card, it's time to finally do the inside. For this next part, we're going to make a speech bubble to put our inside writing, and cut it down so it fits inside your card and takes up about a quarter of the space. Once you have your paper down to the right size, we're going to start adding our writing. For this one, we're going to add the text saying, well, here's a little kiss from me. Trust me, it'll make sense in a moment. Once you have your writing, we're going to draw around it a speech bubble. It's best to do this by drawing an oval, then lifting up your pen, and then draw the curve. This makes it look a little sharper at that corner and not super wobbly. And just like with the boy kisser, we're going to go over all our line art and make the lines a bit more bold. And then once again, we're going to cut it all out, leaving a white outline. Then we're going to open up our card and decide where we want to place our speech bubble. I had a rough idea of where I wanted to place it, but before I fully glued it down, I decided to go ahead and draw the art on the inside so I could still adjust the speech bubble if I need to. For the inside, I'm drawing like a full body boy kisser-esque furry, and to do that, I'm using my one of very few large paint markers to kind of just box out and get the colors on there, kind of like how you would do with lineless art. Anything that actually needs to have an outline, I will go over at the end with my black paint marker. But right now we're just kind of boxing in the rough shape of a weird cat creature. It doesn't need to be super complex, just kind of go with the flow. As you may have noticed, I've left some spots blank. That's because we're going to add socks. I find it's a lot easier in the long run if you leave some spots blank where you know you're going to add color. That way you don't really have to wait for the paint to dry, and it also just goes on a lot easier and doesn't need multiple coats. Also, I decided to make his arm socks like arm warmers or fingerless gloves or something. So we're going to color in his paws fully white. It will be much more clear in the end that they're paws because I'm going to put little lines for their little paw fingers or whatever.
Once you have the general shape of your boy kisser, we're gonna go through and add some outlines. Now this is where the drawing really comes to life. We're gonna go ahead and add some little hair, a face, get those cheek fluff, give him a cute little mouth. I even decided to kind of outline the stripes throughout the socks. And of course, since it's Valentine's Day, we're gonna add a cute little heart. And just like we did with the boy kisser on the front, we're gonna go ahead and glue this guy down. The one thing we are going to do slightly different though is while the glue is still hot, we're going to fold our card in half if the speech bubble overlaps that seam. Because if you let all the hot glue dry, when you go to fold it, it'll be too stiff. This way it'll still fold nicely. And the final touch to make the whole card actually make sense is to take a nice little Hershey's Kiss. I didn't have a Hershey's Kiss myself, so I just made a fake one out of tinfoil and a piece of paper to make it say Furry Kiss as like a little joke. But all you need to do to attach it is to take a little piece of folded up tape and tape it on. This does make it much harder to fold up the card since there's a big bump on it now. And if that bugs you, you can go ahead and put the Hershey's Kiss in a mini Ziploc and glue that off the side. Or you can even make this a card that doesn't fold at all. It's just one flat piece of paper. If you're going to be giving this card out with a bunch of others, I recommend actually gluing the Hershey's Kiss in. Since they're wrapped in tinfoil, it won't get on the candy itself, just the tinfoil. But it will make the card a bit harder to save since it's going to have chocolate foil on it. And the last thing to do is to write who your card is going to and who it's from. And after that, you're all done with your Furry Valentine's card. Look at that silly little boy kisser. Aw, and look at the inside, so cute. Alrighty, on to our next card. This card is made specifically for my ultra-human viewers. Whether you're Therian, otherkin, or fictionkin, this card can be modified and customized any way to fit your Theriotype or kin type. To start out, you're going to pick your base color. For my card, I decided to do a darker green. This card's going to be a little different from our last one. It's not going to be a folded card that you open, it's going to be a flat card that you flip over. So, once you've picked out the color of your base paper, you're going to go ahead and cut it into a small rectangle. Then you're going to take your base paper, in this case brown, and then you're going to take your starting paper, the green one, and line it up in the corner of the brown one, just like with the first card. Once you've got it all lined up, we're just going to cut it out in the exact same shape. If you've done it right, you should have 2 pieces of identical paper. Now, the next thing we're going to do is make the brown paper slightly smaller on all sides compared to the green paper. To do this, we're going to go around each side and just cut a tiny little strip of paper off of every side. When you're cutting off the sides, try and make sure the cuts are all the same size, so when you're done, it's a pretty much an evenly shrunken piece of paper. When you're done, your paper should line up like this. Your green paper should act as a little bit of a border to the brown paper. Once you have it the way you want it to, go ahead and glue it down. Then, once I'm done with that, I like to take my scissors and trim down the green a little bit so it looks nice and even. Once you've done that, you're going to take your card and flip it over to the green side. Now, the whole joke of this card is it's a play on that common meme, would you still love me if I was a worm? But we're going to mix it up a little bit. So, on the front side, we're going to go ahead and write, would you still love me? For mine, I decided to make the word love yellow and make the O a heart. It's one of those small details that just gives it that extra charm. Once you've done that, we're going to decorate the rest of the front of the card with whatever you want, really. For mine, I decided to go with a little bit of a naturey, foresty vibe. But ideally, you'd want to decorate it with whatever your Theriotype is associated with. Like if you have a bird Theriotype, add like a little nest full of eggs. Or maybe if you're dragonkin, add like a cave with maybe a pile of gold in it. Or if you're a fictionkin, decorate it with things that are associated with your kin type. Now, I'm not fictionkin, but my favorite character is Muffin. So if I had a Muffin kin type, I would probably decorate it with like a flamingo, a purple ballerina costume, and a dog cone. All things that Muffin is often associated with. Once the front of your card is done, we're gonna flip it over to the back. So now we're gonna start writing on the second half of that sentence we started writing on the front, which is, if I was a blank. And then you're just gonna write your Theriotype in that blank spot. In this case, as an example, I said wolf. But you could put on whatever Theriotype you have, like a snow leopard, a fox, a border collie, whatever you got. Once you've done that part, it's time to go on to the drawing part. Take a small scrap-sized piece of white printer paper and start cutting it down to size to fit in your card. It should not cover any of the writing, but it should remain within the brown paper. Then once you think you've got it, we can start drawing on our Theriotype. Now, keep in mind, this one's gonna be a little different than the other ones. We're not going to cut this one out. We're just going to draw this little wolf design right in the corner and glue the whole thing on the card. And just like before, I'm just boxing in some colors with gray. It doesn't need to be anything too fancy, just a little doodle. We'll go in and add the small details later. Once you're finished, you should have something that kind of looks like this. Then, with a black marker, we're going to go through and add all the little details. This is where we'll do the line art, add the eyes, mouth, and nose, and any other silly things you might want to add. This is what I ended up coming up with. Then, all that's left to do is add some glue and glue it onto your card. And then you're done. I added a few little doodles and added a fake lollipop as an example, but yeah, it's all done, ready to go. The next Valentine's Day card we're going to be making today is a Dragon Puppeteer themed one. Just like the others, you're going to pick out the color for your base paper, in my case red. And just like the previous one, we're going to cut out a rectangle. And using the same technique as the last one, we're going to cut out a second piece of identical paper in your secondary color, in this case pink. Then we're going to trim it around the edges so it's slightly smaller than the first one, and then we're going to glue it together. Once you've done that, we're going to take a piece of white printer paper. Then we're going to cut it down so it fits within the pink paper. Then we're going to take a black marker and start sketching out the design. This part's going to be the head and top jaw of your paper dragon. I personally don't really make dragon puppets, so I don't really have a lot of skill in, making them at all. So I tried my best to come up with one that looked similar to what dragon puppets tend to look like. But if you're a dragon puppeteer, just make a tiny version of your dragon puppet. What you see me doing here is I'm lining up a piece of red paper to the dragon puppet to start cutting out a bottom jaw. Once you both have the head and bottom jaw, you can start arranging them where you would like on your card. Once you decide where you're going to place them, you can add some hot glue to the back and glue them right on. After that, you can take your markers and start drawing on the face. And I also decided to go ahead and draw on the horns and ears. Also, just in case you're curious, the markers you see me using throughout this video are Posca paint markers. And now, with a paint marker, we're going to go ahead and add in a white bubble. This is where we're going to put our text. If you don't have a white paint marker, you can go ahead and use some white printer paper instead. And once again, we're going to take our black paint marker and we're going to add a fun little phrase. And that phrase is, "What am I to you?" And if you couldn't guess already, this card is going to be based off of a common dragon puppet video trend. Then, using the same technique we did at the start with the red paper and the pink paper, we're going to cut down a piece of white printer paper to the size of a small rectangle. But this time, instead of just making it a smaller version of the red paper, once we get it down to the right size, we're going to cut the whole piece of white paper in half. That way, it leaves part of the red paper still showing. Once you've got the white paper all glued down, we're going to take various markers and make a bunch of different colored hearts. We're going to start drawing them to the far left part of the white paper, and we're going to draw them in a row going from top to bottom. Make sure all of the hearts are distinctly different colors. And for the last part of this card, we're going to come up with 5 different funny phrases to put next to each of the hearts. This will be various options they can choose as the answer to the phrase on the front. I decided to make mine silly as a joke, and give various phrases that all mean the exact same thing. Of course, if you're gonna do one like mine, where all the phrases basically mean girlfriend or boyfriend, or all the same thing that implies you're a romantic partner, it should only be going to someone that you're already in a relationship with. Because if you give this card to someone you're not in a relationship with, and all of the answers they can choose from are basically, yes, we're in a relationship, that can be pretty uncomfortable for them if they don't want to be in a relationship with you, because you're not really giving them an option to say no. And honestly, giving a card like this to someone you're not in a relationship with, basically telling them they have to be your girlfriend or boyfriend, is just not really that appropriate. This card's meant to be a silly haha for someone you're already in a relationship with, so just keep that in mind. And with that, your Dragon Puppet themed card is done! This next Valentine's card is less of a card and more of a gift box. To start out, you're going to grab one large piece of cardboard. Then, using either scissors or a box cutter, you're going to cut down your first piece of cardboard to be roughly the size of what you want your box to be. But keep in mind, we're going to be folding up the edges to make parts of the box, so make it a little bigger than you'd want your box to be. Once your first piece of cardboard is the exact size you want it to be, line it up with a second piece of cardboard and cut it out to make an identical piece of cardboard. While I was cutting out my cardboard, I decided to actually shrink it a tiny bit. Now let's make the bottom half of the box. First, we need the bottom part of our box to be slightly smaller than the lid. To do this, we're going to take one of our cardboard pieces and cut it to be slightly smaller than the first one. After that, we're going to start making the walls of the box. Go around each side of your cardboard and draw a line that looks like this. Do not stop drawing your line when you reach another line. Draw through it. When you're done, it should look like it has a rectangle in the center and 4 boxes in each corner. Using a box cutter or some scissors, we're going to cut out all 4 of those boxes. And then after that, using a box cutter, we're going to carefully go along those red lines, but do not cut all the way through. We just want to break the first top layer of cardboard. This will make bending the cardboard upwards much easier. After that, you should be able to bend each of those cardboard tabs up. What we're going to do is we're going to fold them all into a box shape and then tape each of the corners down so it stays. I personally decided to use packing tape for this, but really any tape will work because we're just going to cover it all in paper anyway. Once you finish assembling the bottom part of your box, we're going to take out a bunch of rainbow colored construction paper. We're going to stack every single color of paper on top of each other. And then, all at once, we're going to cut them out into a shape that will nestle inside of the box. Once you have every single piece of paper cut out, one by one, we're going to cut them and glue them into the box. So once it's all done, it'll look like rainbow stripes. And once you have your rainbow stripes inside your box, you're going to take a large piece of black construction paper. This is going to be the outside of your box. I feel black construction paper is the best choice for the outside because it's such a contrast from the inside. On the outside, it's dark jet black, no color at all in sight. But once you open the box, it has every color of the rainbow. I feel these colors go together so good. Like you see me doing in the background here, we're just going to take the bottom of our box and directly glue it onto the paper. And once it's dry, you're going to cut out the paper, but don't cut it directly to the edge of the box. Instead, we're going to leave a bunch so it can fold over into the inner walls of the box. And just like you did with the cardboard, we're going to cut out where the squares would be in the corners. Basically, once you're done cutting them all out, every single edge of your box will have a tab of paper coming off. After that, you're going to apply a tiny bit of hot glue onto each paper tab. Then you're going to fold them over the box and then push them in. That way it covers the cardboard on the inside of the box too. Now, since this box is going to be themed for a candy kid, of course we're going to need a slot to put a candy single. But instead of using thick and clunky cardboard, we're going to cut out a long strip of black construction paper and fold and glue it over and over until it becomes a little wall. And once you've cut it down to the right size to fit in the box, you're just going to use a little bit of hot glue and glue it in. To make the lid for your box, you're just going to take that other piece of cardboard that's a bit bigger and follow the same steps you did to make the first box. Once you finish the lid to your box, we're going to go ahead and draw some fun stuff on with some Posca paint markers. For the silly writing on the front, we're going to go ahead and add Valentine's Kandi with a question mark. And also make sure to spell the candy on the front with a C and a Y. And after that, we're going to use our paint markers to draw on a bunch of silly candy. I chose some sort of peppermint wrapped taffy and some silly conversation hearts. Now, since the paper is black and that will be hard for a lot of markers to draw on if they're not paint markers, I would recommend using crayons. White crayons can draw on black paper and a lot of other crayons can be useful too. Once you've finished the art on the front, we can go ahead and add our writing on the inside of the box. The message on the inside should say, "More like candy," but this time spelled with a K and an I, like candy bracelets. And after that, the only thing left to do is take your Valentine's candy single, bundle it up, and put it in the slot. And then we can put the lid on, and boom! A lovely little Valentine's gift box for the candy lover in your life. Optionally, I would recommend using some yarn and tie on a little bow. For some extra bonus points, you could even take some elastic covered in pony beads as a bow tie. And last but not least, let's make our ESSA themed Valentine's card. We're going to use the same steps we used in our furry card at the very beginning, and we're going to cut 2 pieces of paper that are folded in half that nestle into each other perfectly. After that, you're going to take the blue paper that's going to go on the inside. Then, using some scissors, we're going to cut 2 small notches into the paper, like so. Then, take the middle flap and push it in so it folds backwards while the other 2 still fold the same direction. When you're done, it should look something like this. Once you're done, you're going to glue the blue paper into the purple paper. Glue everything in but the middle tab we folded outwards. We need that to stay like that so it can be a pop-up card. After that, on some blank paper, you're going to draw your emotional support stuffed animal, and presumably your partners too. And be absolutely sure you draw them with matching gear. That's important to the card. After that, you're going to cut them both out, leaving a tiny bit of white outline. This part is technically optional, but I found it looked best if you cut out a tiny bit of grass for them to sit on. Once you got everything cut out, we're going to glue it all onto that centerpiece that's folded outwards. This will make it a pop-up card. And once you've got it all glued down and you have confirmed that it absolutely works, it's time to add the writing. I unfortunately lost the footage of me adding on the writing, but basically just write, "Hey babe, what if we," on the front, and got our ESSA's matching gear on the inside. And when it's all said and done, it looks like this. Look at that, that's so cool and super duper cute. And would you look at all these amazing little cards we made. Whether you're a weird kid or just a weird kid at heart, these cards would be perfect for anyone who just wants a little bit of silly in their life. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!